includes murder, torture, perjury, embezzlement, fraud, deception, treason. These are just a few of your many crimes against humanity. You will not win this war, for you are fighting the very essence of humanity.
Hi, welcome to Truth or Talk. I'm April Budden.
And I'm Virstyne Henry.
You can check out our website at truthertalk.com, see what we're up to, check out our archive shows, find our Conspiracy Realist t-shirt available, and support the Dorch family. We talked about them in our last show, but if you go to our website, we have information about this family that's going through a police state nightmare. You can help them with their legal fund if you are interested, so please just check that out if you're checking out our website. And so today we're going to be talking to Chris Emery in a little bit. This is our third time having him on the show. He's really, really good guest. Anything for Steve?
Yes, he knows everything.
Not
everything, but I'm joking, but a lot. He's for real. Well, he's been in journalism and film and radio for a little over 30 years. Mm-hmm. So he's had a lot of experience, met with a lot of people. He's done a lot of research, and he's very professional. Right. He's very humble. Fair. He's very humble, too.
Yeah, we noticed that the first time we met him, because we had him on, I want to say it was early on.
He was one of our first interviewees, I would say.
Yeah, I would think it was like our 10th show or something like that, and, we're in the 70s now. Yeah. And but he was like our 10th show, I think, or somewhere in there, and he had just put out the film A Noble Lie, which is a documentary about the Oklahoma City bombing, and it was so good, and we were, we thought, wow, this is a big, big filmmaker here.
We were all nervous and stuff.
Yeah, and he's going to be on our show, and now he's just Chris. He's just our bud, and this is our third time, and we're very comfortable with him. But he does really good work, and that's a really good film. I think if anybody wants to check out what happened that day, the second largest act of terrorism in the United States, the first until 9/11, it was the largest that we'd ever seen. And the official story is crap. It's bullshit. It's total, and it's just not even a matter of whether it's, it could be, it's not even close. It's so far removed from what actually happened. But they do a really good job of dissecting that in that film, A Noble Lie. And
I liked how they use a lot of witnesses too to basically put everything together.
Yeah.
So the people that were actually there and experienced, and you can just see through listening to other people, that were there, that the official story doesn't add up. You don't even need experts to talk about, or scientists, or people that are quote unquote authorities on the subject matter and stuff. I mean, they have those too, but I think for me the most compelling part of the movie was the witnesses that were a part of it, or that were there, that basically told their side of the story and what really happened.
Yeah, I agree, and that was a different perspective than I think a lot of films get into about the various things. And when I first started to kind of wake up or go down the rabbit hole, and I started to, one of the first things you recognize when you do that is the atrocity of 9/11, or you start seeing that. And I found that a lot of people who weren't awake almost find it offensive to talk about, an alternative to the official story or official narrative.
Yeah.
Like, how dare you? Like, you're being rude to the dead.
Oh, and,
and then by this film exploring that, talking to witnesses and talking to survivors and family members of the survivors, and you get a sense that they are some of the biggest questioners of the official story, more than anybody. Yeah. And they actually are not only are they not offended by it, they're offended by the BS that they're being fed through the official story, and they want to get to the truth of it. Because wouldn't you? I mean, if your family member died and you had somebody, that you lost over something like that, and you would want to know what happened to them. But that's the whole, like, I don't know, it's weird.
Well, you know, I did watch this one video. I think it was like, it was something like Jason Burmis or something, where he was going, they were passing around pamphlets, or either Luke Rudowski, they were talking about pamphlets, you know, passing out pamphlets on the anniversary, and this lady who lost, I think, her husband in the building was like irate, and she was just like, how dare you talk about that? And I was just like, you know, why would she be upset? They're trying to get to the truth. Like you said, what do you want to know, the real truth behind what happened? And I started thinking, you know, I was thinking that maybe some people think of it as a double betrayal, you know, that not only has their loved one been murdered or died, but now they have to come to terms with the fact that they've been murdered by their own government, and they've been lied to through their own government, right? And now we're sacrificing other people and killing other people and going to another country by means of our own government. And I think for some people that's a hard pill for them to swallow. You know, I wish there weren't as many people. I wish people weren't like that, because if there were more people questioning things, we wouldn't have these situations in the first place.
You're right, exactly. Yeah, exactly, and that's a good point, because people get like that even when they don't have a family member, but they're just because they are, you know, they are so upset about being lied to or being duped or just about being wrong, you know, that you can imagine. I mean, if you had that same mindset, but then you have a family member who's passed on, and so it's like a double betrayal, you know. I mean, and they're probably receiving some money, or, you know, they're getting some kind of support from the government, and so they feel almost like, oh, you know, they're taking care of us, or they're doing this and that, but it's not, you know, it's, I mean, think about how long it took the government to figure out to take care of the people who got sick after the debris, getting exposed to the debris and the rubble. You know, how many people died, more people died since the bombings that were, you know, trying to be the first responders and people who were trying to help during the whole thing as it was going down than actually during the initial attacks. So where was the government then? Where were they to take care of those people? It's this.
Oh, they were in Afghanistan or Iraq. They were in the Middle East. That's where they were.
Right. Yeah. We don't have the funds. The funds are not available. But the funds are available. It's just that they don't. You know, because they just print money out of nothing anyway. So what do they care? You know.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you mean the funds aren't available? You can make them available if you want to. You can do whatever the fuck you want. That's obvious. You know, and they try to pretend like there's this limit on it, but but not when they want it.
Yeah,
for their
exactly.
own crap, you know, it's like, and then have all this money all of a sudden that just disappears, and they go, oh, I don't know what happened to, you know, $40 billion. It's like, what? What do you mean?
I must have fell out of my wallet when I wasn't looking.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't know. You know, I mean, when they were questioning Bernanke all those years ago about how Ben Bernanke, the former head of the Federal Reserve, about how what happened to, like, I forget the exact amount, but it was something like that, something outrageous, and you were just all, what? Where'd all that money go? What? We don't know. I mean, come on, guys, you know, and then you sit there and, well, we don't have the money to help sick families that got exposed to this, and it's, what's her, named Donna Summers, the who passed on a few years ago, said that she got cancer, and she believes that it was due to the exposure of the buildings after 9/11, because she was living in a close proximity at the time, and she thinks that she got sick from having been exposed to all that. And yeah,
I forgot about that. I remember now. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's sort of it's sort of interesting that she said that and that she brought that up, and then, but can you imagine, I mean, the people who were actually working in it, and then those people all got sick and died, and so I just think, you know, look at stuff like that and you go, but then you trust these people to give you the truth when they don't even care about you and they don't even try to, like, make you feel good. I mean, they're not even trying to help you after they put you in harm's way, you know, or like the veterans in this country, like, oh, we send them to war, but then their care when they get home is crap.
Oh, totally. Well, you know what, that leads me to another conclusion, is they just want you to die. You know, which is like, obviously, you know, they don't care. They want you to die. If they're not, you know, they're trying to hurt you and they hurt you to the point where you're suffering, you're not dead yet, and they're still not helping you, they want you dead. I'm sorry, folks, but that's what I think the conclusion is.
There was someone recently said to me, somebody in the truth movement was kind of suggesting that it doesn't appear to be the evidence of a depopulation agenda because we're actually growing in numbers. Our population is actually getting greater. So where does it show that there's a depopulation agenda? So in that maybe it's not so much about them trying to kill us off, but to actually be able to control the way we think, the way we eat, the way we, access healthcare, but to actually just kind of contain it. I think it's easier to contain a smaller number than a large number, so therefore
I think they're trying to kill a lot of us off.
I think it sort of goes back to the whole social Darwinism thing, is that, you have this social Darwinism is where, survival of the fittest. So, let's throw everything at them and we'll just see who survives, and then that's pretty much it. We're not necessarily focused on killing certain people, most of the time it's just kind of random. We're just looking to see who's going to make it out alive, and that's the whole concept that Darwin had, was that just, it was just survival of the fittest. And that's what a lot of the Nazi experimentation was. Those Nazi scientists were just looking to see kind of, what if we do this? What if we put this in the water? What's going to happen to these people? What will happen? A lot of it was pharmaceutical experiments. They just wanted an excuse to take a bunch of people and round them up and test their drugs. Is this going to make us superhuman, or is this going to kill you?
Yeah.
Because we don't really know. I mean, we have an idea. We're creating something. We want to genetically engineer beings to be as flawless as possible. So how are we going to do that? And how can we manipulate that? How can we play God? So it's just happening on maybe on a larger scale, in this throwing everything out there. Let's throw some chemtrails at these people. Let's see what happens. I don't really know. I can't say why they're using the chemtrails. I mean, when it comes to something like vaccination, I think it's obvious because it's going directly into your body. So you're an effect of what's going to happen on the other end. For some people, they know exactly what's going to happen. But as far as the trailings and things like that, I really don't know what their purpose is for things like that. But it's happening, and are they trying to kill us? I don't know.
Well, you're right. I think that they're experimenting, but they know some people are going to die, and I think they do have that kind of survival of the fittest. Mm-hmm. Maybe it might be a little bit of what X-Men, some people mutate and it would make them have certain abilities or be resistant to certain things where other people won't. Other people that, aren't as resistant will get sick and die. But I think with the chemtrailing thing, there are multiple, agendas. There are people that want to control the weather, the people, because with, and then they connect it with HAARP. So HAARP has that weather controlling capabilities along with mind control, and I mean, there's so much shit going on. Who fucking knows?
Exactly.
But we all we know is that our environment is being intentionally polluted, and there seem to be people that don't care and keep doing it, all the fracking that's going on,
Mm-hmm.
And how do you not, it's messing up our water table. I mean, it's so much stuff going on. It's so much that there's some agenda, and maybe there are people involved that have different agendas, that are involved in the same thing, but they each have their own personal different agenda of what they want the outcome to be. Who knows, man?
It's true, and on so many levels too, And I mean, I was just thinking the other day, because I want to do a show about Darwinism, because it seems like even some people in the truth movement don't recognize that that's a myth. And one of the things I think we do when we talk about the medical establishment and all these things, that we've gone in and as far as these scientific myths, that where I I guess I would call it a scientific myth. I don't know. Maybe that's a lack of a better word because it's not real, actual science. It's not based on research and data collection. It's based on somebody's theory. They think that they're going to do something, and this is going to be the outcome. And so then they just preach that like it's the truth. You know, and we could go throughout history and give out names of famous scientists who are totally full of shit.
Yeah.
Like Jonas Salk, Louis Pasteur. Who else?
Scientists.
That are totally full of shit. Those
Freud?
are I can think.
Freud? Maybe he had some good points. I don't know, but I know that, you know,
right.
when it came to talking about him and putting his theories to him, he just, you know, he said whatever was convenient to save his butt. So.
Right. Yeah, and then the dude that came up with the HIV, what was his name?
Oh, Carrie, the PCU, the device that
PCR. Yeah.
PCR.
Right. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, well, I don't think he's full of shit, though. He was just saying that, like, I'm running at this test to find the HIV, but I can't find it. Right?
Right. No, not him. I meant there was the other guy.
Oh, Montagnier. No, Montagnier. It was two people, Montagnier and his name will come to me in a second. I can't think of the name, but the other guy. I can't think of it. It'll come to me. Just keep talking. It'll come.
Yeah. So anyway, and then Darwin himself, who you can buy the book that we have available. It's our friend Liam Sheff wrote, and he talks about. He does a whole chapter on Darwinism, and he gets into a lot of these myths created by man. They're not real. They're not real true sciences. So that's why I hesitate to call them science myths on one hand, because you know. If it were real science, it wouldn't be a myth. But it isn't real science. They base it on, you know, whatever their agenda is, be it social Darwinism or be it experimentation or be it depopulation, whatever it may be, or just like some of these scientists like Jonas Salk, I mean, I think he just wanted to be famous. I think he just wanted to be important. You know, they're self-interested.
Oh, and it's so funny because I think when people think of scientists, they're in that category with doctors and teachers that they're all benevolent, you know? That intelligence equals benevolent, and if you're going to go into a field of, like, medicine or science, you're going to be a teacher that you always have the best intentions for humanity, but they don't realize that those people can be fame whores just like the next, you know, reality star, you know?
Yeah. And then there was somebody this is somebody who's in the truth movement. We've actually talked to him before. We interviewed him, and he got mad at me the other day for saying that Darwin's theories were based on religion and were religious in nature, or belief in Darwin's theories are religious because they're not. He doesn't even scratch the surface. The thing that's wrong with Darwin's theories is that he doesn't even scratch the surface on the complexity of human life. He wants it to be this random thing that occurs when, you know, one thing meets with another, then all of a sudden it becomes something else, and that's evolution. But it's not like that. It's very intelligent. It's very complicated, and, you know, the natural frequencies that our bodies and the earth and everything is attached to, or the natural frequencies that occur change every nanosecond. It's a very complicated thing. He wanted you to think that it was something that happened over time because, you know, it adapted just by chance, just by random. And it's wrong. Okay? And there was some poll that was circulating around, I guess, asking people if they believed in Darwin's theories. They wanted to know, did they believe in evolution, or did they think that, you know, our human existence was the same as it has always been? And he said, and I guess most people think that, or 50% of the population of this, wherever they did this poll, so that they thought that people were the same as they've always been. And so he got kind of like, oh my God, like, why are people so stupid, you know? And the article was written by RT, and I kind of have some questions about RT lately. I think RT Russia Today came out as like, oh, they're, you know, they speak the truth, or they're one media outlet that kind of does articles and things that are, you know, relevant to the truth movement and things like that. But I've kind of questioned that in the last few years. In the last couple of years, I've been kind of like thinking that they might be a part of the propaganda machine. And I certainly felt that this was a divide and conquer article because it was written, even though the poll didn't mention Darwin's theories, they listed as, people don't believe in Darwin's theory. And they
that's because it becomes fanatical, like religious, too.
Right, exactly. And that was sort of my point, is that if you buy into his theory, though, without questioning that, then how is that any different than, than a religious belief where you're buying into whatever the priest tells you, the preacher tells you? Or,
it's not. There's no difference.
Right. These scientists that people worship, quite frankly, it's, a lot of people who don't believe in God, or who don't believe in, they don't have any belief system that way. They think that these guys who they have now replaced the priest. You know what I mean? It's like Jonas Salk is a deity. He's a Nobel Prize winner. He's these guys who win Nobel Prizes and who talk about things that in climate change, Al Gore. These guys are deities. They're not to be messed with. You can't, in the same way that people defend their religion. And
yeah, totally. Yeah, no, you're exactly right. Sorry, I just want to, I was going to add something to that, but you're right, because I see, we talk about this, but I think you illustrated that beautifully about how, a lot of people, I think, too, that aren't religious, they've been burned by religion, and they think that going to science is like a safe place, but basically they've replaced what they're running from with the same thing, just with different terminology.
Right, exactly. That's exactly it. And so I was sort of surprised that somebody who I thought was kind of awake and smart actually he insulted me. He called me a Bible. He said, "I've never heard anyone say Darwin's theories are based on religion unless they were a Bible thumper or a, And I'm like, right. And I'm going, me, a Bible thumper? Are you kidding?
Yeah.
I haven't been to church since I was 6 years old. My grandma took me.
Yeah, I know.
I'm not even remotely, it's not even something that I had to, pull myself away from. It was actually, I never was raised with any religion whatsoever. So
that's so funny, though. He's basically become the thing that he's hated, He's probably running away from people that he would call Bible thumpers, but yet he's become a religious fanatic because he's a science thumper. I don't know.
Exactly. Science thumper. So I wanted to do a show on, I hope maybe in the future we can get someone who could really come in and break down and dispel this myth about Darwin's theories, because Darwin's theories are a lot of what the elite base their eugenics population model on. It's based on Darwin's theories. Okay? So it is really dangerous to not question them. It is actually dangerous to our livelihood, because if you start to think that you can start to, people doing all kinds of weird things, like that lady that suggested post-term abortion, basically killing a baby as old as 3 years old because, they were born disabled or they were born with an affliction or something like that. That's the kind of thing that Darwin's theories can lead you to, because they want you to believe in this model of survival of the fittest and things happen by random
war. Too. People use. I had an argument with a friend of mine. We got into it big time because I was talking about war, and one time, and we were like, he was like, well, yeah, of course we're going over there to the Middle East and Africa because we need oil, and we're just stronger, so it's too bad. We have better military, so, too bad. And it's that's sick. That's sick.
Yep.
Well, I think, too, the truth movement, or truth is, everybody has their own version of truth and what is true. So it's going to be a personal journey for each individual. And if people are still caught in this mindset where they have to be superior to you because they're insecure, they're going to let things like that divide and conquer us. That's not healthy.
Right.
And like you said, it's dangerous to believe, anything basically without questioning it, including science. Because, science's jobs, as Liam would say, is to collect data, and then the individual scientists interpret that data. So any discovery, any theory, there's always opposing views. There's nothing that's really set in stone. And people have to realize, I think, science has been sold to us, too, from the point of view, if, the theory that progresses or the theory that's in the forefront is the correct one. Because, and most likely it's the theater that has more money behind it because they're people that have their own personal agenda that they want to push on the public.
Exactly.
You know?
That's really good. That's really, really well said. So with that, I think we're going to take a short break. And then when we get back, we're going to be talking to Chris Emery, documentary filmmaker. He did A Noble Lie and A State of Mind, a film about mind control. And then we're also going to talk to him about the new projects that he's working on. So those are two documentaries that we recommend, A Noble Lie and A State of Mind. So we're going to have him talk about those a little bit, and then also the new stuff that he's working on. And, and a little bit about this, I guess, about, this all ties into the whole mind control thing, what we're talking about, how people get indoctrinated by one religion or another. So, and they can call it what they want, but it's still based in a religious belief. So whether you believe in the official story of the Oklahoma City bombing, that could be religious belief because you're not actually looking at the scientific forensic evidence. So anyway, so that's what I have to say about that. But please stay with us because we are going to be talking to Chris Emery, and we don't want you guys to miss it. So hang on.
Bye.
Everything I'm looking at seems crazy. The newspaper, the television, nothing's right. Nothing's telling me what's true. It's like I fell into a bucket of cream and kicked my legs until I became a mouse. What's that about? I'm a conspiracy realist, not a conspiracy theorist. I want a t-shirt that represents me. What? There's one that's available? Go to shop.truthertease.com, says the voice in my head. Shop.truthertease.com. It's not crazy. I'm not afraid to go on the internet and go to shop.truthertease.com. I'm not scared. I taken out bowling balls that look like you. That's what I said. Straighten out. Get your conspiracy realist t-shirt. Don't make me come over there. You look good. You look good.
Hi, welcome back to Truther Talk. Today we're talking to Chris Emery. Chris is one of the producers of the groundbreaking feature A Noble Lie. We've talked about that on the show before, which investigates the true nature of the second largest act of terrorism in American history. He is back to talk about his newest release, State of Mind, a film which explores the psychological control of the human species through media, subliminal, and pharmaceutical control. Please welcome to the show, Chris Emery. Hey, Chris.
Hey, Chris.
Thank you, April. Virstyne, thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, no worries. So, I'm excited about this movie. Well, I've actually seen it already, so I saw it probably like the first week it came out. I'm really, it was really detailed, and it was very, it seems like there's been a lot of effort to basically keep the human species dumbed down and confused and powerless. And I was just curious, first of all, what made you want to, coming from A Noble Lie, what made you want to make a movie on mind control? What was
It was actually, we had a kind of a nebulous idea about doing something on mind control, even as we were in the throes of getting A Noble Lie produced. And we were getting a lot of feedback after A Noble Lie, Oklahoma City, 1995 was released via email. From all over the world. It was really humbling to, number one, to get that amount of feedback, and number two, to realize that people from all four corners of the globe, so to speak, were watching the movie. That was an unintended good consequence. But they were asking us as well, why didn't people ask more about the Oklahoma City bombing? And we're talking about, we're getting email from people that weren't even born at the time of the bombing, so they were completely befuddled why there wasn't a more critical review of that case. But the more feedback we got from these people, the more we realized that, yes, we do have to put this movie out to at least give the people the tools and the basic understanding of why we're controlled, why we're taught to think a certain way, why we're taught not to be critical in our thinking, all the way from birth till the day we die. And so I think that was probably a large part of more, even a bigger inspiration for us to get the second film out. And mind you that we had several on the list to put out as our second film, but all the arrows, as they say, were pointing in the right direction for us to do State of Mind, Psychology of Control.
Yeah, because you can really see how you doing A Noble Lie. Now that you're saying that, it sort of occurred to me how well that does transition into state of mind, because you get into it in A Noble Lie a little bit about Timothy McVeigh, and I think a lot of people might find it odd when you're talking about this A Noble Lie, if they don't see the movie or they don't know anything about the history. They think, well, Timothy McVeigh, didn't he confess? Didn't he say that he did it? So why would there be a conspiracy there? Didn't he? But then once you get into it, you find out who his doctor was. And can you explain a little bit about that and tell our audience?
As far as you mean,
Jolene West. Jolene
West. Yeah. Oddly enough, his family's from Oklahoma City, and he studied under Ewan Cameron, who was one of the pioneers of the MK Ultra program. Now, MK Ultra is more of an umbrella term used, but the CIA had various experiments going under that umbrella term. And Dr. Ewan Cameron, as we developed in the film in State of Mind, Psychology of Control, actually worked with the Canadian government. He was the head of a lot of notable peer-reviewed publications and a member of high-ranking psychological institutes and studies and so forth. But a lot of these institutes he belonged to, we're talking about Ewan Cameron, all of the arrows pointed back to whether it be the Canadian government or the U.S. military or the British military for mind control. How are they going to control the soldiers to make them the perfect soldier? And that was pretty much the nexus of their work. They weren't so much interested in civilian life until they found out a lot of the data they were collecting from the enlisted personnel would cross over perfectly with the civilian people. So Dr. Jolene West was an understudy to Ewan Cameron. And what we found out, and Al Gore actually he put his foot in his mouth shortly after the bombing. He says, we're going to get Dr. West up here to talk to a lot of the victims' family members and survivors to pretty much make sure that we have one storyline going here. And it's like, wow, that was a huge gaffe if there ever was one. And once we figured out who Jolly West was, he's the Prince of Darkness. This guy, when Jolly West shows up in your town, you know something horrible is going to happen. Even after, the tragedy like this, horrible in the sense that a cover-up. You're not going to get the truth. This guy is, he is the worst of the worst. And then, of course, we have Dr. John Smith, his understudy, who was also from Oklahoma City, ended up being the head psychologist at Guantanamo Bay for 3.5 years. So, I mean, you see how these people work. And the movie, what we do is we elaborate on that a little bit, but we take their work and we break it down in the simplest of terms, try to have the viewer understand, look, this is what's happening. There's no denying this. It's not even up for debate anymore.
So when I was watching this, I already knew quite a bit about mind control, but it was really great to see you guys break it down into simple terms. So maybe somebody that isn't familiar with this, it's a good starting point if they want to go deeper and do even more research. And the visuals that you provided made it really simple, I think, to understand too. In addition with the explanation of things. But I was just curious, do you think that society is in such a state of mental slavery that we can emancipate ourselves, or it would be hard to, or what do you think about the state of society today and how they would take it?
Well, I think there's the human brain and the human body and the human mind and the soul. We're talking a lot of different levels of energy in the body here, and that's one thing that these experts understand, such as Jolene West. They know how to control the various levels of your mental and your spiritual and your soul, your energy. You have incredible chakra zones in your body. They were able to control every one of those through the soldiers. Taking the flip side of that is, if we know how to control that in a good way, if we know what I guess maybe I'll rephrase it another way, if we know what our potential is and what we have inside of us, absolutely, we can take control back. We can realize our potential, and the key is to be educated to see who our adversaries are, how they want to take advantage of us, and then once we know our own tools, we can counterbalance that. That's the whole thing. It's the yin and the yang, and there's no balance here right now. The media, the school, schools, a lot of the education. We didn't tap into the religious side of it because that's kind of a hot potato there, and that would have been an abyss that we didn't want to step into. That's for another movie and another time and another discussion. But once the people understand, and that was the purpose of this movie, at least to give them a primer, just like you said, if you know what your good tools are and how to counterbalance the bad, the people that are trying to take advantage of that in a bad way, then we have a chance. Absolutely. Here's the beauty of this thing. We have a new generation. Always, rebirth. You're getting new children coming into the world. And the people that want to control those children, the information we have in this movie tells the viewer how those people want to control the kids from the minute that they're born.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But you also have the ability to get away, do your homeschooling, get away from the structured education, and give your children the ability to plant the seed in their fertile mind in a good way instead of a bad way. And, and Dr. Alden Taylor, in one of his interviews toward the end of the movie, a snippet, he says, when was the last time you had an original thought? And that's the whole purpose of this thing. You have to continue to have good original thoughts and to work for the welfare of mankind versus the demise of mankind.
Going back to education, I was really disturbed because I'm a teacher and I'm teaching a summer school course right now. And one of the subjects that we read about, it was this chapter on forensic science, and they gave some case file studies. And one of the case file studies was the Oklahoma City bombing. And these kids are like 9 or 10 years old, and it basically, says that, Timothy McVeigh was the only person that could have done it with his truck, and, and then you have these little 9 and 10-year-old kids who are reading it, who are going to read something like this, and they're going to take it as the gospel truth, and I got so disturbed. I told them, we read it, and after I read it, I was telling them, just because you read something in a book, it's not the gospel truth, especially with a historical event. They're different perspectives, and that they should explore the different perspectives. And I personally didn't believe the story that we were reading, and they were, shocked. They're like, how, you don't believe the book? I'm like, no, I don't believe the book. And I told them about your movie, A Noble Lie. I had them to write it down and told them they can, rent it and purchase it. I don't know how many are actually going to, and I don't feel like I have, I'm not in a position where I can bring it into the classroom and show it to them and have a discussion about it. But it's disturbing, and I see as a teacher too, not just this, but there's been some other situations where I've been, I've had to teach some things that I didn't believe, and I always try and tell the kids that I have a different opinion, but I don't know how far that's gonna take them, because it's being indoctrinated at a really, really fast level, and they don't even think that there even might be another perspective or another opinion about anything that they read. So
that's a very good point. And on the flip side of that is you'd be surprised, even in some of the film festivals that I've attended regarding the first movie, that we had some young viewers in there, and they came up to me and asked me. And, some of these kids were 8, 9, 10, 12 years old, and I was very humbled because they're critical thinkers, and that's our hope. That's what we have. So, it's like you take a sheet of legal paper and you put a line down the middle. On the left side is the folks the dark side, for lack of a better term. The folks that want to take advantage of these kids. And on the right side, it's like, these are the fertile minds. These are the parents that realize not only are they being fed BS on a daily basis, they want to get the tools to counteract that. Yeah. So it's nice but unfortunately, the darker side is more prevalent now with your high tech, with your phones and your texting and all of what's on the internet. And we have to stress to the kids that you can use those tools in a good way too. And we're not hammering this thing down their throat and telling the viewer that this is all conspiracy. This is all fact. This is what's been happening for several hundred years. We have the ability to work with it now. But
it is conspiracy, because there's a conspiracy to give people limited information and to cover things up, So I think also too, people need to realize that conspiracies do exist, and when people are labeled as a conspiracy theorist, they're labeled a conspiracy theorist as a pejorative or slur. It kind of puts them down, but it's true, it's fact, and people need to realize when they hear that word conspiracy, what does the word conspiracy really mean? Right? What is
exactly when two or more people get together to conspire to do a certain act, whether it be good or bad.
And this is all throughout history, and people need to be educated on the term of actually what that means and why something is a conspiracy. But I think people use that term without even realizing what they're saying. It's like calling a black person the N-word. So
it's completely unfounded. You're right. Interesting feedback on that, and even as grown adults, just to revert back to the first film, I've not been on, put it this way, I'm persona non grata at the Oklahoma City National Memorial Museum because the staff there knows that I did a critical analysis of the case. And they have 4 different storylines for the bombing being presented in that museum. It's absolutely ludicrous. And, and this is an interesting side note that you talk about controlling information. Yeah. The very first archivist at that museum, even before they opened the doors, it took them about 1.5 years to get everything set up, to vet through what was donated, victims, family members, survivors, some of the artifacts from the crime scene. She told me point blank that it was the FBI field office here in Oklahoma City. To this day, they continue to do this. They vet every single thing that comes in and out of that museum as far as displays, what's going to be kept in a repository, what's going to literally be thrown in the dumpster. And he only wanted to support the official storyline, the very narrow, very focused, and completely ludicrous narrative of what happened. So when you have your law enforcement agencies, especially the local field office here, doing that, you know that it's corrupt from day one. But and to continue that one more step, we have grown adults. They get up every morning. They go to work at the museum knowing full well what they're doing. They think it's the right thing to do. Well, that's childish. I mean, you would expect something like that from a 5 or 6 year old, not a grown adult.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
critical thinking and people are conditioned to believe that museums are benevolent, that all the information that they're displaying is, for the good of the people. But nobody ever thinks to think that other people have their own agendas when they have exhibits like that. It's
so
interesting.
That was another impetus for us to put this movie out. It says, okay, let's just break this down, figure out why this is happening, bring the experts in. Don't take our word for it as a film crew. We went and sought out these people.
So you're not allowed to go to the museum at all? You're not allowed to set foot in?
It's not so much that I'm not allowed. I've been there about 18 or 19 times, and I was down there for... it's rather odd. In fact, I brought a date along this last time. She knew of my movie, and she liked it, and she invited a girlfriend of hers and her girlfriend's fiancé, who was a filmmaker. And they walked around, and literally within 30 seconds after I stepped on the grounds, within probably 20, 25 feet, I had 3 security guards kind of shadowing me, and they're all looking at me like, what are these guys doing? And I just shook my head and said, don't worry about it. So I let them follow us for a couple of minutes. I turned around. I walked up to one of them and says, is there anything I can help you with? I knew who they were. They knew who I was. They're just trying to browbeat me or harass me. That's what they try to do because they think that I'm going to lash out and just go off, like a drunk street corner preacher and start yelling and screaming. No. I'm an adult. I'm mature. I'm a filmmaker. Yeah. I know what's going on here. Yeah. And I'm not going to disturb the peace, so to speak, but they're childish. They really are. It's very adolescent what they're doing there.
And it's sad. They don't realize that system that they're serving is eventually going to turn against them,
Sure.
Right, yeah. Yeah, and
it's the most bizarre thing. You literally have to be here to see it when it happens.
Well,
it's like clockwork.
I believe it. They're like, it's that guy. Stop him for spreading truth. It's the truth seeker. Stop his truth,
Yeah.
Yeah, it is childish, as you say, because, our just normal human development, you go through a period of time in your life between toddlerhood to probably about 9 or 10, maybe 11, where you believe in magical thinking. You can kind of suspend logic in your mind, and that's normal. That's part of the growth of your imagination and how, we develop myths and things like that, and kids, that's where a lot of imagination derives from. And then, even I wrote this essay a couple years ago about when my son, my oldest son, was 8 years old. He came home from school on the anniversary of 9/11, and he had told me the story that the teacher had told him in class. And, going to what you're saying, Virstyne, when you're a teacher and you have 20, 30 students in your class, it's really hard to sort of plant the critical thinking, chip in their brain. But as a parent, it's kind of on you, to really do that, because you can take your child individually and say, and work that out. And so what I did was I just sort of kind of asked him questions, and I used his logic by asking him if he had seen, did you watch how the planes hit the buildings? And he said yes. And so, kids respond very well to sensory manipulation, so I took 2 bottles out of our recycle bin, and I said, okay, show me, and I had him give the example of what it looked like. And so I said, did it look like what you saw? And you sort of like ask these questions to kids, and then they can come up with the conclusion themselves. And what his own conclusion was that he didn't necessarily believe what they told him because it didn't seem to make sense. It didn't match what he had seen through his own experiment. And so, I think just to put that out there is for parents. I mean, he's graduating from elementary school next week, and then we're going to homeschool him for middle school. But I mean, it's just something that I want to just project to parents if you're listening. Like, it's not all hope is lost, and kids are very responsive to questions. Let them figure it out, because then that will stay with them longer than if you just tell them what to think. Because you don't want to then do the same thing that's what's being done to them, which is that they're just being told what to think. I was trying to be very respectful and not just browbeat him with, oh, that's not it, that teacher's crazy.
Sure.
I wanted to kind of make him figure it out, and he did. And so that was.
But then you have those kids that want that, but you're right. I think they want that because they think it's easier. But when they figure out that they can figure things out for themselves, it does stay with them longer.
Mm-hmm. And then
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. You go ahead.
The key is that what you're doing, and it's a beautiful thing. It really is. Not to sound trite, but you're giving them the tools to discern what's true and what's not. You can't get any more basic than that, and I mean basic in a good way. And that's what young minds are. They're thirsting for that. They want to know. Okay, they even though they may not realize it, their subconscious is they want to be able to discern like adults. And it's a slow process. But I think what you did was great, April, and I wish a lot more parents would think that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted to put that out there because I know as a teacher it's really difficult. You can't really do that because you can't get them one-to-one. But as a parent, you can take your kid one-to-one and really just talk to him and bring up questions. And Virstyne knows my son, and he's pretty he's a pretty good critical thinker. And I think it's just because he naturally asks questions like that, and but you just want to start them as young as possible with. You don't have to tell them what to think. Just start teaching them how to think. It's a very different tool, and it will stay with them for the rest of their lives. And that's where there's hope. There is hope to emancipate ourselves because we've all been through that, where we were kids and we were told the official story of the JFK assassination, or these types of things, and that was the end of the story. You didn't hear anything more about it, but then later you do learn to question it. So speaking of that, Chris, what are your thoughts on the human mind and just how does imagination play a part in freeing our minds?
The human mind is an incredible tool, and in fact, we only use about 10% of our mind. My interest is in the other 90%. It's like, wow, why haven't we even learned how to control, even another 5%, additional 5% of our mind? It's because we were conditioned over the years to only think a certain way. I think it's amazing. It's like stepping up to the edge of a cliff and looking down into the good abyss. There is so much there to be discovered. And to have, going back to Machiavelli, as we featured in the film, how he taught the royalty, the people that actually moved the chess pieces around the board, so to speak, the power brokers. These are the kingmakers, the king breakers. They would bring people up to power. They would have them murdered if there wasn't a certain agenda that was followed. And he was able to step back as a third party and say, hey, you guys want to stay in power, this is how it's going to be done. These are the tools that you need. And Machiavelli did it in a very sinister and very just completely criminal way. But he knew how to master the mind. And he knew that it was a resource, an untapped resource to work with. So, it was a learning process for me, ladies. I didn't know a lot of this information in this film. I took on a completely different role when this film was brought out. In Oklahoma City, I was one of the head researchers. I had put 11 years, almost 12 years worth of work. On the second movie, I was more or less in charge of logistics. So I had a kind of a fresh perspective. I was looking in on a lot of this data that we were putting into the film. And I was amazed. I knew bits and pieces about it, having taken college-level psychology courses and so forth. But looking at the interviews when we went through the edit process was fascinating. And I was there on 5 of the interviews myself, helping out with the lighting and answering the questions and sitting in front of Alex Jones for 2.5 hours. I mean, who does that? And it was kind of surreal in and of itself. But to hear a lot of the information coming out of their mind, talking about the human mind, how it's untapped, and how it can be used either for good or bad. So to answer your question, it's just, I mean, wow, the sky's the limit. It really is.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm excited when I watch this movie now, even go through from beginning to end, and I'm always learning something from it.
I'm curious, though, you're talking about Machiavelli and how he was talking to the kings and queens and how, he's like, if you're going to manipulate the masses, this is how it should be done. So if people are manipulated to serve the elite and their agenda, is it possible to manipulate people into becoming more conscious? Is there, I mean, you talk about like how something we should take on ourselves, but is there a way to... Or maybe that's not the right way too. Or do you think that's, if you're manipulating people into becoming more conscious, are we doing the same thing that the elite is doing to, are we no better than what the elite is trying to do basically?
We are better, because the elite is what they're trying to do is control our potential. And if you counteract that, you take a 180-degree turn. There are good people out there, and some of them we interviewed in the film. And even historically, even back at the time of Machiavelli, there were people who's like, "Look, there's no way that we're going to be herded like cattle. We're not going to be controlled. These are the tools that we have to have unlimited potential." So I think it's a good thing. I mean, who in their right mind would want to bring up their children, and this alludes to April, not to be critical thinkers? Well, why would you want to do something like that? Your mind and your body, and we are able to do so much good with what we have. And to give people that want to control that and do it and use it in a sinister way, and to keep us as under a perpetual serfdom, that's the definition of insanity. I can't even imagine anybody wanting to live in that environment. So to answer your question, to counter that, yes, that's the good thing. And I think we wouldn't have all these wars. I mean, we can open up another Pandora's box. I mean, look at the evil in the world today. There's always going to be evil, but we could at least decrease the level of that evil. And at least get a better control of what's going on.
Yeah, more people are aware of stuff like that. Just think about. I'm sure you can do a whole movie on the military and how the military is manipulated into going into war. And I've gotten into arguments about people. I put on this. I posted this quote that Henry Kissinger said on my wall. It was about like something to the effect that military men are dumb pawns. Used for war or something. I'm paraphrasing. I don't remember the exact quote. But I had a friend of mine that was in the military get angry at me. He was like, "Do you believe that?" I was like, "No, I don't believe it, but this is what he said." And he was like, "Well, the military's not about that." He's like, goes off of me. I'm like, "Why are you mad at me? I didn't say it." You should be mad at the dude that you're working for him. Who do you work for? Why are you mad at me? So maybe he got some food for thought, but I think a lot of these people that get into the military, they either, they have good intentions, they're heroic, some are psychopaths, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
And then some are heroic. Yeah, but some do have good intentions, and they think that they're going in to help people, or they're going in because they need somebody to pay for college, or they don't know what to do with their life. I mean, and a lot of people don't really realize what they're getting into, and then you have some people that have come back out of war and they've woken up and they see that they get the whole picture, but you still have those people that are still just kind of stuck, and they're sad or they're upset. They don't know why. A lot of our soldiers are coming back and killing themselves, killing their families. And I think it has to do a lot with being mind controlled. They're getting vaccinated. Who knows what the chemicals are doing to their head. In addition to that, in addition to the horrible images that they're participating in or watching as a result of being in a war. That's a whole other movie within itself just on that.
Interesting note you'd make there, because we had a lot of crossover and the intel and the information we were trying to put together in a cohesive train of thought for our first movie. And we had a lot of very good sources. In fact, some of them still work at Tinker Air Force Base. It's the largest material Air Force base in the world. And it's here 12 miles southeast of Oklahoma City. And they deal with Navy, U.S. Air Force, logistics, repair and maintenance, and so forth. And then, of course, the AWACS base is here. but we were getting intel completely unrelated to the bombing, fed to us by people that knew that we were awake and we wanted to get the truth out on the bombing. But an unintended consequence was to get intel about the MK-Ultra program that was going on at the airbase in the 1960s right through the early 1980s. And, I mean, it was horrendous. I mean, prostitutes and homeless people were being taken off the streets of Oklahoma City and within the Metroplex, within about 30 miles from the center of the city, never to be seen again. These people had no families. It was horrendous. And then human trafficking, oh my God, that was a whole other door. I finally looked at a couple of our co-producers and one of our sources at the airbase. I had dinner with him at Denny's, and I looked at him and I says, look, I appreciate you giving us this information, but we can't go beyond the scope of the Oklahoma City bombing right now. And he looked at me and he agreed, and he says, yeah, you open these doors, Chris, he says, you will not live to celebrate Christmas with your nephews next year. Wow. Guaranteed. I mean, it was just cold, hard, head sledgehammer hitting the concrete floor, serious. He said, don't even touch this stuff. And he knew about the mind control and the human trafficking and the prostitution and these homeless people just disappearing, vanishing. Nobody, they had no claim to any family. Who would have missed them? Right. So, and then I reflect back on that when we did our second movie, and I thought, wow, you talk about the rabbit hole going down so deep. I know. And right now, ladies, I can tell you, as a matter of fact, I've seen clear, irrefutable documentation that the heads of state of the most powerful countries in the world, and on record we have, 168 countries, bona fide countries in the world. At least half of those countries, their heads of state are intimately involved in human trafficking and in mind control, without a question. Wow. They trade these people electronically. It's like a Sears and Roebuck catalog except online, or they have their own version of the Internet, constantly trading human trafficking. And it's going back and forth. And the U.S. military bases, Canadian air bases, they're like the Vatican. They're their own city-state in and of themselves. Nobody knows what's going on in some of these bases. And 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, it's just like cattle. It's unbelievable. They'll order gender, size, hair color, whatever, age. It's, all the way from 8 until, until they're 50 or 60 years old. It's really sick. Yeah. And then that brings us back to the state of mind. I said, why do these people do this? And how do they get away with it? So, it exists. I've seen it, and I chose not to open that door because it's so vast. It's unbelievable.
Right. And that's really, really disturbing. I mean, if you look at that stuff, anytime we've had, guests on to talk about these things, or if you've seen the documentary Conspiracy of Silence, which was done by the former Senator John DeCamp about uncovering
great movie.
the Boys Town trafficking. And, I mean, and a lot of the people involved or the whistleblowers on that, disappear or end up suicided. Or, I mean, he was lucky to have survived, but I think it was because he was just so vocal and publicly talking about it. But it was really creepy. It's almost unbelievable when you hear those stories, because it just so goes against what you understand as human, what human behavior is, the way that they traffic these young children and the things that they do to people. You think people don't do that, right? Like, that's just, that's your normal thought, but it does go on, and it's been proven time and time again. And so when I heard like the Penn State story, I thought, oh, that is probably really, really dark. And then just looking into it, moderately, it really was very dark, and it had some very questionable connections, and some people disappearing and stuff in those stories.
Well, the DA disappearing. Who kills off the DA that's investigating the case? That's like, okay, huge red flag right there.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. Huge red flag right there, and that was the case that ended up being dismissed. And then, of course, later they found Sandusky guilty. But it took. I mean, they'd known for many, many years. He was in and out of. He was in and out of court. He was always being. They knew for a long, long time, and then the DA disappeared, just vanished. So yeah, it was pretty creepy. That's awful stuff. I don't. Ugh. I don't blame you for not going down that road.
You go as deep as you can. I mean, the work that you're doing is and maybe somebody else would have the power or the courage or whatever, or be in a position where they can maybe open that door and they won't be as, vulnerable as you could have been for doing that, But you got to do what you can, and there's so much going on out there. You can't blame yourself, for not doing everything, because it's impossible to do everything. So maybe
right, and that's one thing we really had to pull the reins in on in the first movie. One of the gentlemen in the movie, V.Z. Lawton, he's since passed on. He's done a marvelous job of helping us put all the intel together. 16 years of research he brought to the table. It was just astounding. And he looked at me and he says, look, it's like having a team of 12 horses in front of your stagecoach. How in the heck are you going to control these horses when they're running wild? He says, you got to pull in one rein at a time, finally slow the horses down, and then come to a complete stop and say, this is the direction we want to move. And it was a great analogy. It's just how it makes sense. And once you're able to do that, then you get a cohesive train of thought. And you do not, absolutely under no circumstance, want to put so much information out there that you're going to overwhelm the viewer. Yeah. They'll think that we're smoking crack, and it's like, okay, that's completely different. You implode on the movie, and you defeat the purpose of it in the first place. But getting back to the child trafficking, I asked my source at the air base, I said, look, how does this happen? And he says, the kids that are actually born into this, you have people that are trafficking, they bear their own children. The kids are brought up in this environment. They think that's normal. They don't know anything else. They end up growing up, becoming adults, and running their own part of the trafficking ring, so it feeds upon itself. Oh, wow. And so we take an example like that, and it was just glaring, hit me right between the eyes. He says, okay, if that's the way they want to conduct themselves, there is the other balance to this. Kids that aren't in an environment, that grow up to be adults, to realize that there is a different way to live. So once again, it's the yin and the yang. Like I said, there's always going to be evil in this world. You can't completely eradicate it, but you can at least do your best to minimize it.
Yeah. And it's so bad. I think that would be in a situation as deep as that. It's something that people that are doing the trafficking or being trafficked would have to come to realization themselves of what they're doing is wrong or what's being done to them is wrong, which is sad to say. But I mean, there's only so much that you can do, because, there have been cases too, I'm sure, where people have reached out to help somebody, but then they didn't want the help or didn't think they needed the help, and you can only go so far. You can only help people as much as they want to help themselves. Have you heard about Kathy O'Brien? Have you heard about her?
I haven't.
She's MK Ultra, sex slave, and basically she got out. She was basically born into it. Her father sold her and her siblings into mind control and sex trafficking and stuff, and she actually got out. But she had help. She found somebody to help her get out, but she actually had to want it for herself to be able to get out. So I don't know what triggered that in her, but something did. And anyway, so she anybody listening, you can Google or YouTube Kathy O'Brien interview. Also, I think Arizona Wild is another one. Aaron McCollum. They've all been people that have been born into this horrendous horrendous thing. I can't think of the word, but for lack of a better word, but
parallel world.
Yeah, but they've come out and they've spoken out about their experience, and so I noticed that you talked in the movie that the movie State of Mind references were made to George Orwell's 1984, and while I have some examples of my own, what are some connections that you've made to the way that society is being run and the way that the thought police are being implemented into human civilization today?
Oh my gosh, there's one example after another. I mean, just the way I'm looking at my iPhone 5S here. I mean, that's a tool for. We know the NSA is tapping into that. We know. I try to use it as a tool for good, but they're probably listening in on our conversations. They're probably listening in on this interview here. Oh my God, that's such a vast area. 1984, the state controls your thoughts. The state controls your food, your entertainment, the way you interact, whether it be emotionally, physically, sexually, whatever, with your companion. And a lot of that has actually come to fruition. You see what's on the internet today. You can tap in and pretty much get anything you want, from the good to the profane to the completely insane stuff. So that is offered out there to try to bring us down to a mediocre train of thought. And that's exactly the bring everybody down to a level playing field. Well, that's not the way the human potential runs. There are good people and there are bad people. There are outstanding people. Not everybody's equal.
Yeah.
And the way our education system, this Common Core, for instance, today, thank God our state legislature in Oklahoma defeated that. The federal government wants to put a Common Core so everybody's equal. Mm-hmm. That's not the way humans exist.
Yeah.
There's always going to be your good. There's always going to be your, a certain segment of mediocre and a certain segment that are excellent. You have to have those different levels of competency and of being able to get along. And I think that's where it really touches upon. If Common Core doesn't set an example of George Orwell 1984, I really don't know what does. And to stem back to that, I had a nice conversation with Charlotte Iserby, former deputy. She was administrator for the Department of Education under the Reagan administration. She and I had a very animated 45-minute conversation after I sent her a copy of the DVD. This is a month or so after the movie was released, and she loved the movie. And she told me that, let's throw back here to 1984 to answer your question. She said in 1952, when she was coming up, she was out of college already and already working for the government in various capacities. She was writing white papers for the Department of Education, giving them advice on how to actually strengthen our education system here in the country. And time again, she was seeing documentation coming in through the back door at the DOE that emulated exactly what the Chinese government was trying to do, the Communist Chinese government. And that's what Common Core is today. It's a reintegration. It's a how do we say this? It's basically reincarnation of what the Chinese Communist government was doing. And she lit up like a Christmas tree. She says, if there's anything, one of the worst things you can do is have that in our education system. And that's exactly what Orwell's 1984 did. But that was conceived back, in the 1920s. So these people wanted to implement this stuff way back then. They just didn't have the tools to do it. Now they do, and it's just accelerating at quantum leaps because of the technology that we have. I hope that answers your question.
No, it didn't. No, I'm just kidding. No, it was perfect. It was a perfect answer.
That's just one answer. I mean, there's so many ways you can go on this. I try to stay focused when I answer, but wow, it's really mind-boggling. And I don't get depressed. I look at it as, okay, this is what we have. This is what we're facing.
Right.
But we also have opportunity to correct it, or at least give the people the tools to think on how to counteract it. We can't tell everybody what to do, but we could give them the tools to think for themselves.
Yeah.
And you know what? That was another aspect of the first movie, and I think that's why it did so well, is that we didn't insult the viewer's intelligence. We actually tried to complement it.
Yeah.
And I think it was amazing, just absolutely amazing. To this day, we still get really good feedback on that film, and it's been out, for almost 2.5 years.
You're right. I did notice that, and it's hard sometimes too when you know so much and you just want to tell everybody what you know. It is a hard thing to do without being condescending in sometimes. And I have to watch too when I communicate, information to people, that I'm not being condescending, because I'm not trying to come off as arrogant or that I'm better than you. I'm just trying to get you to get your power back. That's what I want. I want people to have their power back. And for when you guys are complimenting somebody's intelligence, I think that's a brilliant way to give them information and still make them feel smart, because I think sometimes you tell people certain things, they think that you're calling them stupid. And I've been accused of that. And I feel bad when I have been accused of that, because I'm not trying to do that, at all.
Oh, yeah. I understand. With the feedback we had at film festivals or public screenings, there were some people that got irate, and I let them vent. I don't interrupt them. And then when they're done, I says, okay, I understand. I can empathize with you. I sense and I tell them, I says, I sense there's a level of frustration because you didn't know this information before. And then they calm down and they realize, yes. And some of them broke down in tears. And I says, whoever it is, a male or female or a child, they said, look, that what you're doing is you're breaking your cognitive dissonance. You are actually realizing that you've been duped all of these years.
Yeah.
And I tell them I didn't have any interest in the case up until, year 2000. I could have cared less about it. So I empathize with them, and I said, look, everybody has the opportunity to turn that corner and to become wiser about certain issues.
Yeah.
It's a good thing.
Oh, no, totally. And, April and I talk about this on the show a lot, too, about, we think that's one of the main reasons people have a hard time waking up or becoming conscious, so to speak, because you really have to admit that you've been duped, and a lot of people don't want to admit that because they think that makes them a bad person or a stupid person. If they're a stupid person, they're a bad person or they're not good enough, whatever. But I think that's one of the things that you really have to, you have been bamboozled, but it's somebody taking advantage of your naivete or your sincerity, because human beings should be open and, responsive, but the people that manipulate that, they're the evil ones, not you. They're the bad ones, not you.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, you have to suspend the ego a little bit. It's sort of our natural defense mechanism sometimes to put it up and be like, well, I'm not wrong. And when you feel that you're sort of being attacked, or maybe you're not, someone's trying to imply that you're not intelligent or something, but it is something that if you really want to break that cognitive dissonance, as you say, then you have to let that go a little bit. Just, or not feel so bad. I mean, have the self-confidence to know that you're okay just because you got something wrong at one time. Doesn't mean that you're, a bad person or stupid. And so speaking of arrogance, Virstyne and I were talking about this years ago. We both watched this Mike Wallace interviews Aldous Huxley, and at the time we mentioned 1984, and Aldous Huxley wrote the book Brave New World, and there's some similar themes in both of those two books. And at the time we were kind of thinking that maybe he was trying to warn us, but since we've done some research since then, there's some question about whether he had some connections to intelligence, Aldous Huxley and his brother Julian, and so we're sort of like, well, maybe he wasn't warning us, but just being kind of an arrogant bragger. And you see kind of a similar characteristic in some of these guys today, like Bill Gates, who will come out and kind of tell you what he's doing, but then it's sort of in his own arrogance sort of gives it away. But if you're not really paying attention, you might think that, he's just warning you, or he's a great guy just trying to help everybody out. But why do you think that...
Sure.
Why do people put so much power in these guys' hands? Why do you think that they, put power into these people like this and give their power away to them?
Well, it's kind of a loaded question. Now, let me try to do the best I can to break this down. And we're talking about powerful people such as Bill Gates. I think part of it is the fact that they are in a fraternity, for lack of a better term, of other people that are so power hungry that they think they're omnipotent, that they are beyond reproach. And you get to a certain income level or a certain level of wealth or whatever, and they're untouchable. So I think that's in human nature when you're above the masses, so to speak, on a lot of different levels. And then, that you talk about, it is so shallow on so many levels too, that they think that they could call the shots, that they are God. And even doing the research on this second film, it's like, wow, Aldous Huxley, he's talking about psychotropic drugs and how they were going to implement them to control the masses, and he said that's so easy to do that.
Right.
Well, all right, so you just look at a simple statement like that. Who's involved with controlling that? You have your big pharma, you have researchers such as Huxley and his brother. You have big money coming in to invest to perpetuate this machine that wants to control over us. Of course, these people are going to think that they're untouchable. They're all-knowing. I'm not saying it's right, but at least the main thing that we had to deal with in the first movie and the second movie is, who are we dealing with here? How do they think? Not that we agree with them, but once we got into their head to a certain extent and saw their perspective, it made telling the story a hell of a lot easier. And then it also made bringing the solutions out a lot easier, too, because we knew, at least to a certain extent, what their motives were. And to answer your question, they feed on themselves. They give themselves the power but in the end, it's the worst, undoing. It unravels it. It exposes the facade that they're trying to prop up, and it's really, not only is it sad, but it's very sick.
Yeah.
These people, the irony is that they're the ones that need help and not us.
Right.
Yeah. And it's,
Throw it right back at them.
but then you get people too that, like, we were just talking about, just to elaborate a little bit more on the question, that defend people like Bill Gates, or they won't, like, Al Gore. He's a politician. Politicians are known for lying, but yet people give him the authority to speak about the weather.
He doesn't know jack squat about it.
He doesn't know jack squat about it yet. And then you have I forgot his name, but he's an actual meteorologist, and he was like the founder of the Weather Channel. Wanted to sue Al Gore for fraud, and yet you bring this up, and people will still defend Al Gore. You're like,
sure.
How? What? How is that even possible?
I happen to know some very wealthy people here in Oklahoma, and don't get me wrong, I have nothing against wealth.
Yeah.
I have nothing against people succeeding. I think that's outstanding.
Yeah.
Again, you're going to have your rich and your poor. That's a given. It's always existed over eons. But it's what you do with your wealth and what you do with your power and the ability to help mankind. That's the key. Bill Gates, there's this facade that he perpetuates. It's floating up there to a certain level that says that he's trying to help out donating computers. You dig down deeper, and this guy is.
He's the devil.
Oh my God! I mean, it's so sinister and.
Well, that's total doublespeak what he does, because he parades himself as a humanitarian. But yet he's doing the opposite. He's the exact opposite. I'm sorry. And then when I talk to people about it, they get so defensive, and they always defend him, and they think, like you said, like, I'm not against wealth. They think that I'm hating on him because he's rich, but I'm not. I'm hating on him because he's evil.
Yeah, the vaccines, for one, that's one issue that he's supporting. But
he's invested in Common Core. He's promoting that. That's his deal too.
Right.
I hate him. And I don't want in case he turns up dead. I'm not saying he should, but I just want him to be exposed. And I want people to know, because if somebody kills him or offs him, that's not going to solve the problem. People just need to be aware of what is going on, And if he was exposed for the demon that he is, then people would, this couldn't happen again. And that would be his punishment, because all of the, people that would turn against him would just be devastating to him,
Yeah, and it's interesting how you use the word fraternity, because we had a guest on our show not that long ago, Dr. Rima Lebo, and she was talking. We asked her about how when she's a medical doctor, and how you go through medical school and people come out of it just so indoctrinated. And she basically, what she described was medical school and your internship as you're coming up is they use forms of mind control. They use, literal, and it's like what you're saying is a fraternity too. It's like they use the ridicule, and they make you feel as if you're smarter than everybody else. They kind of give you that, like, inside sort of jab, like, oh, only certain people of this sort of intelligence can get to where you are.
Plus, but then sleep deprivation. Sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but
right, sleep deprivation. Certain forms, but it's on a. I guess, there's varying scales of how this, but they're the same sort of techniques, but varying scales about how they're used. And so a lot of these doctors, they come out and they do believe in the vaccination programs and things like that, but only because if they ever had an opportunity to question it, that was sort of quashed immediately, and they were made to feel inferior, so they're so afraid to speak out and sort of show a contrary opinion, because they have been, they use those types of techniques, those types of mind control, sleep deprivation and ridicule and, paddlings. It's like literal, it's like almost where in fraternities you see the old movies where they're like paddling the guys and making them walk across hot coals and things like that. It's like, they use these sort of torture. She called it torture, literal, is when you go through medical school, because that's what they put you through, and they don't want you to think, so they make you really tired so that you're just going around and doing your work.
And you are kind of isolated from society, because you're so engrossed in your work that you're not really maturing or growing with the people outside of your circle. You're just kind of confined into that because you're always like studying. People that I've known and that have gone to medical school, at least, they're always studying. They're always, not really having time to go out and do things. They're always in a book. They're always isolated. So.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So Chris, I mean, going back to your work as a filmmaker, so you did. What makes you decide on what subjects you're going to do documentaries about? So you chose to do a documentary about mind control, and what's the next film going to be about?
It's called, our working title, it's called Shadow Ring, New World Architects, and it will be a very similar approach to what State of Mind did, more of an academic, very thorough approach to the subject of the Council on Foreign Relations. And it's actually based, looking at it on my shelf here now, it's actually based on a book. The title is Shadows of Power, The Council on Foreign Relations and the American Decline, authored by James Perloff, who's actually working with us very closely on the production of this. James has done an outstanding job of breaking it down, once again, in the simplest of terms. Very easy to read book. Over 300,000 copies have been sold since it was released in 1988. And he approached us. And we knew of his work, and it was something that we had on the back burner after State of Mind was started, and he approached us just by synchronicity and said, "Would you guys be interested in doing a screenplay on this to do a film?" And we were very honored because he's like Steinbeck. He's not really a recluse, but he doesn't really get out there and promote his work. He's doing more of that now that he's on board with us, but he really just kind of stays on his own. So it's like, wow, James Perloff calling us? Are you kidding me? So that was it was a blessing. It really was. We were both of like mind and spirit, and then we just came together. As far as other subjects, there are two movies. One in particular that we want to pursue that is going to delve into a subject matter in the Oklahoma City movie that needs to be fleshed out in a movie in and of its own, and that is a biographical documentary on the black police officer, Terrence Yeakey.
Yeah.
We've been approached to do a full-length film on that. And then, of course, we've got another one. I can't disclose the subject matter right now. So we're looking at least two more.
Oh, come on. I won't tell anybody.
I have to wait until the investors are secured and we get a non-disclosure agreement set up there. And then after that, I've just approached by a radio show host out of New York City. He's been a very good friend of mine for 4 years, wanting to deal with the terrorism and what happened in Italy and Germany back in the 1940s and how that perpetuated to 9/11. A brilliant researcher wrote a white paper on that from Switzerland, the last name of Ganser. He has an incredible cache of information that is equal to, if not more, than what the 9/11 group has put together, with such as Richard Gage. Great work on that subject. But this is a parallel. It's pretty much the prequel to 9/11. What led up to that, and why 9/11 wasn't an aberration. It wasn't the exception. It was just the norm, except the higher body count. So this radio show host said, "Look, I've got all these people I want to bring to the table. Will you guys want to do a movie on this?" I said, "Wow, okay, yeah, definitely. But we're looking 2.5, 3 years down the road, and it's probably going to cost close to $200,000 to do a film like that." So, I don't have any problem blurting it out now because it's a distant project. So, by way of exposure, by way of our recognition, which we're very humbled to get. People are coming forth and saying, "Look, I've got this," and these experts willing to come with documentation. It's not hearsay. These people aren't just finding this stuff on the internet, on the computer in their basement of their parents' home. They've been working on this stuff for 40 years, and so it kind of comes out. It's amazing.
Yeah. Wow, that's
really that sounds good. Really interesting. Yeah, I right as you're talking, I found. Ganser, and I bookmarked that because that might be a future guest. His work
he really is.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. So,
well,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go. You go.
Oh, I was just going to say, we've Actually, never mind. Go ahead, Virstyne.
I'm backtracking a little bit because I realized there was a question I wanted to ask. Because there's a part in State of Mind where you're talking about all the experimentation that has been done on human beings in the, quote-unquote name of science. And, they were conducted by doctors and nurses and scientists. And I'm just curious, when they were looking for people to conduct these experiments, did they keep it, well, I guess it couldn't be compartmentalized because they would see what was happening to the subjects. So how could, did they seek out doctors and scientists and nurses that did have a sociopathic, personality or sadistic personality, or were they threatened into or bullied into doing these experiments? Because I don't see how you can conduct all these experiments and look at what's happening to the people and not have any remorse for what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. And it stems back, honestly, I don't know how the recruiting process came about. Mm-hmm. My best guess, and this is something that, as far as stems back to Oklahoma City, is the big question is how is something like this carried off? You get a certain number of people that are compartmentalized. They only go so far in a chain of the overall experiment. They don't understand the whole picture. And there are people that are like that. They're like, robots. They're so ingrained in med school that they will do a certain part of the experiment, and that's it. And then they're given accolades, they're given raises, they're given chairmanships or whatever, and they don't know any different. So 20, 30 years down the road, the bulb might come on and say, wow, I was part of that. That was a sinister project. Some of them have remorse. Some are very proud of it. You just get a diverse background of people coming together for these things. Now, as far as the subjects themselves, I can offer at least somewhat of a qualified answer on that. What we found out, a lot of these people were either mentally or physically disabled, or they came from socioeconomic backgrounds that they really had no choice but to accept the money or be duped into thinking that they were going to be paid a lot of money, and some of them met their demise during the experiment. Some of them actually passed on. So there's a level of deceit, there's a level of need, and it was a symbiotic relationship, but in a bad way. So the medical community in some corners knows exactly where to find these people, and they have no remorse in doing that.
Yeah.
So it is what it is.
It's terrible. I don't know. For me, a lot of all the work and the research we do and the guests that we have on, the thing that disturbs me the most are the sex trafficking and the mind control victims. I just get my heart goes out to them, and I just get really, really upset. I get really angry and get really sad, and it just There was one paper that crossed our desk, so to speak, that came from that institute in Montreal, and the name slips my mind right now. We elaborate on the film, but they were getting a lot of their test subjects, from orphanages in Eastern Bloc countries. Oh yeah, well we know because we have a friend, Liam Shupp, who he did an article on how they were doing medical experimentation in orphans in I think it was upstate New York.
Yeah.
We know orphans are common for all kinds of experiments. It's terrible, man. It's terrible. It's horrendous.
It reminded me. Yeah.
Huh?
The Chinese, the Russian government, they had all these satellite communist bloc countries, and they wanted to shut down these orphanages. They were just overbearing on the money and the personnel, and so they were literally shipping these children that grew up as adults or young adults into the orphanages to Canada to be experimented on. It was a one-way ticket. They knew that these people were going to come back. They knew what their demise was, and it's like, wow. I mean, it's like Satan. It doesn't get any more evil than that.
Yeah.
It's no regard whatsoever for human life. Just doesn't matter. I mean, they wouldn't if it was in their own families, but they just don't even think of these people as human. It's really sad. And speaking of that, I mean, I know we're going on kind of a dark thing, but when you were talking about that, we were talking at the beginning of the show about MK Ultra and this child trafficking thing. It sort of started me thinking about Hollywood and how some of the people who have been child actors, I mean, we see a lot of the child actors grow up and they're a mess, and you could point to a lot of reasons that maybe they turned out that way. But some of them have said specifically that, pedophilia is a common thing that goes on. And I'm just curious if you've had any insight or any intel onto this as far as part of this MK Ultra programs, if they do use Hollywood and they do start taking these kids and that's part of their programming.
Never really had a chance to develop on that. I know exactly where you're coming from, and the thought had crossed my mind, but we didn't get into any specifics regarding Hollywood. Now, I've been in radio, television, and film for 32 years, and what I've seen, even working as a contract employee with a major network, I've seen some of the higher-ups, the national directors from flagship stations in Chicago and New York, and some of the things that they brag about at certain social functions, and I just shake my head and thinking, man, you are sick, to take part in stuff like that. And they did allude to pedophilia and other things going on in Hollywood. And I just, first thing is like, I'm glad I'm not working for them directly, and I'm glad they're not signing my paycheck, because if I would stand up and make a comment, I'd be fired. Well, I resigned about a year later anyway, because they just got fed up with the quality of the stories that they were wanting to put out. I refuse to have my name roll in the end credits of stories that I knew were completely false. I mean, this is whole cloth lies, and these people didn't even bat an eye about it. And that was back in the early 80s. It's even worse now. Our mainstream media is a joke. It really is. And I'm not talking about the secretaries or the cameramen or the engineers or the maintenance people. It's the top-level decision makers, your program directors, your station managers, and your owners. They have no regard for the sanctity of journalism. They don't double and triple check their facts. They just throw stuff out there as fluff. And it's really it's unfortunate. And people, and these students coming out of college, are you kidding me? Trying to get journalism degrees? A very interesting interview with them at a college that's out of Central Florida State University. And they were saying, what can we do? We want to graduate with a bona fide journalism degree in media. I says, don't work for the major media. Start your own outlet. Start your own, blog on the internet. Go independent, because you're not going to be a slave of the master. Anyway, I didn't mean to go off on a tangent there.
No, that's great.
It's just amazing what these higher-ups, they're, even the head of CBS, head of Disney, what you see at the public function is not who they really are. I can guarantee you that, plain as day. Most of these people they have a lot of psychological problems. They really do.
Do you think that they're themselves may be victims of mind control? This may be going out on a limb, but I have another movie that popped in my head. Have you seen The Temple of Doom?
I haven't heard of it.
Indiana Jones.
Yes,
the second one, where they go to this palace and the people at the dinner table are different people. Like they have a personality that, and then they go at night. They go to this sacrificial worship ceremony where they don't know what they're doing. So that and you find out that they're under control of this solution that they had to drink. So basically they have a personality where one that's the one that's presentable to the public, and then they have another personality that does the sacrifices and stuff, but each personality isn't aware of the other.
Sure. I would say that's not too far-fetched. I know American University in Washington, D.C. is a crucible for the CIA. Again, that's not even up for debate. In fact, their board of trustees and their regents aren't even ashamed of that anymore. They're saying, yeah, we are one of the best recruiting, I don't know what the term was, sources for the CIA. And here at University of Oklahoma in Norman, had one of the recruiting agents come on campus and having an open discussion. I attended as a civilian. And they're acting like you're being recruited to be on the set of a James Bond movie. No, that's not it at all. It's really, getting back, and he did allude to the media. They are recruiting people to basically foster certain talking points in the media. Okay, well, where's there any objectivity? Where's there any integrity? Bam, kicked right out the door. Why would you want to work for somebody like that? I don't know. I wouldn't. I wouldn't feel good waking up in the morning, looking in the mirror and saying, you know what, I feel good about collecting a paycheck from this guy. I'm going to go to work and, continue to enable their agenda and just pretty much give a half-truth or just make stuff out of whole cloth lies. What the heck? What's the Bureau going to know? They're not going to know any different.
That kind of goes back to your film too. Another tier of mind control, where you're talking about making people want things that they don't need, and how you reduce them, to a certain state of consciousness by making them feel like they need a certain amount of money and having a certain amount of things. So a lot of people may take that job wanting that paycheck so they can buy the best car, or the most electronics, or whatever.
Exactly.
Not that justifies it, but that's probably the state of mind, or one of the state of minds that they're in. So.
Exactly, very much so. And Chris, it's been really great having you back on the show, and you're certainly welcome anytime. This is our third time I think we've had you on, so lucky number 3.
There's the charm.
There's the charm. Well, they were all good, so they were all a charm. But we are out of time here, and we're going to go ahead and wrap up and take a short break, and when we get back, Virstyne and I will close up the show. But before we do that, we want to thank you as always, and remind everybody where they can locate your work and find and get copies of your films.
Sure. Thank you, ladies, for the invite again. Once again, just www.freemindfilms with an S, freemindfilms.com. And we have links on there to both of the films. It'll give you the short trailers, and you're welcome to purchase from there. It's always an honor to be on your show. Look forward to coming back.
All right. Thanks, Chris.
All right. Thanks, Chris. You
Bye-bye.
too.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Hello, thanks for having me on your radio. Even though we're not from a famous rock and roll band, if we were, even though we sound a little like we are, we'd definitely wear a Conspiracy Realist t-shirt, because they're gear, aren't they? Oh yeah, they're really gear. I want to write a song about them. Conspiracy Realist t-shirts at truthertees.com. I gotta think of the middle 8. Shop.truthertees.com. What does that mean? It's the internet. What's that? I don't know. It's a net. It's between things. Shop.truthertees.com. What's that? It's where you get Conspiracy Realist t-shirts. Oh, gear.
Welcome back. Thanks for listening to Truth or Talk. We just interviewed Chris Emery, of filmmaker, of journalist, filmmaker. He used to have a radio show, but I don't think he does anymore. He probably doesn't have time because he's doing so many things. But he did the documentary film A Noble Lie and A State of Mind. So if you haven't seen those, please go check those out. And he's got new stuff coming up real soon, which sounds really intriguing. Many projects that he's got going on right now is really intriguing. So, yeah, good as always to have Chris, wouldn't you think?
Yes, inspiring and humble and just informative as always. So it was great.
Yeah, what a lovely guy. I know he's always great when we have him on, and we had him on real early on, and as I think I mentioned in the intro, and this was our third time, and it's always good to have somebody who's a pro and comes in and just can really talk eloquently about it, and answers questions. He's just great. So it's interesting because right before during the break, you and I started talking about this thing in the news, and I guess it kind of ties into what we were talking about with Chris, all this stuff about mind control, because we're seeing it happen younger and younger to children, and we were talking about this story about these girls who tried to kill their friend.
Yeah, the Slenderman story.
Over Slenderman. They wanted to show their allegiance to Slenderman, I guess, because Slenderman's a mythical character who goes around killing people, and he he takes out their organs and replaces them with toys.
Yeah.
I don't know. It sounds really creepy. But it's just an urban legend. It's been around for a while, and they have he shows up in video games and things like that. But what do you think about that? What do you think happened there? Or what do you?
I think that something else is going on. Where these girls on psychotropic drugs or drugs that maybe they had, or a girl, or I think it was a girl and a boy. Were they on drugs? Because I've heard my students talk about Slenderman. I heard your son talk about Slenderman before. They're not going around stabbing people, and the story said that they killed their friend, and their friend, it wasn't even somebody that they didn't like, it was somebody that was supposed to be their friend.
Right.
To prove their allegiance to Slenderman, which it doesn't even exist. And it's did they hear voices? You don't really hear a lot about, the details. I didn't get a lot of details of the story. Did they hear voices because of, that were in the form of Slenderman, or, I could easily say maybe this is some kind of form of mind control, because I don't get, it just doesn't make any sense, and it's very disturbing, and they're young, they're like junior high age, but who knows, man? I mean, I first of all, I would like to know if they were on any kind of mind-altering drugs, because I know as a teacher I've seen kids on that stuff, and kids will flip out over, the things that you don't even, over the smallest things. Like I remember, I used to work a lot with the special ed and what they would call emotionally disturbed children, where just basically you just didn't know what was going to set them off. And now that I'm out of that situation and I look back and I was like, those kids were on drugs, were pharmaceutical drugs, and that was probably why they were acting the way that they were acting. Like, I go into this one classroom, and this boy, he's like about 4 years old, and first of all, all of his teeth are silver, like all of them. Like his whole mouth is silver, and I was told because he knocked all of them out. So they replaced him with silver, like Jaws, like Jaws and James Bond. Like his whole mouth, not like one or two, like his whole mouth was silver. And I like bend down to him, and I'm like, "Hi, how are you?" Like, trying to introduce myself, and he just like jumps on me. He's like, "Ah!" And he just attacked me, like physically.
Oh wow!
Where it was frightening, and I'm scared of a fucking 4 or 5 year old kid,
Wow.
And then, some of these kids would, I remember I had this one kid, we were watching a movie, he gets up, and he walks out of the classroom, and I could see where he was going. I was just going to wait, and maybe I was like, I don't know why he's jumping up like that. He walks out the classroom, walks back in, and just punches this girl in the face with the fist. And we're watching a movie, watching like a Disney movie. The irony, right? Like sweetness and wholeness, and this kid just comes in and he just starts like, after he punches her in the face, he starts just like kicking the desk and trying to turn the tables over, and he's only like 5.
Right.
And I knew that kid was on medication. I didn't know what I knew now, but now I feel I can see where it can tie together. And then you talk about all these kids that do the school shootings. They've always been on some kind of pharmaceutical psychotropic drugs. So I think there's more to the story basically than what the media is telling us. There's got to be. There's got to be. I didn't like see Dracula and wanted to like poke somebody in the neck with chopsticks or something. It doesn't.
Right.
It doesn't make sense. There's something else, that's some missing element that's going on.
Well, it's true, and it's not a new thing at all to have mythical characters. That we were talking about this is how they've been around forever. We've always had monsters and demons and things like that. Even in the Bible, there were good guys and bad guys. And there were guys that did horrible, horrible things to people. And so it doesn't matter where you go. I mean, the kids. In our day, in the 1980s, if you grew up in the 80s, you had Jason, and you had, the Halloween movies, and you had the Friday the 13th and stuff like that. And we weren't seeing these mass shootings at schools, and we weren't seeing, like, kids, wanting to stab their friends. Like, shit like that it's just starting to, like, snowball to where now it's happening, and the kids are only 12 years old, It's like, it's not just kids in high school, it's like, these 12-year-old kids, and they stabbed their friend 19 times. You know how hard that would be?
Yeah, emotionally too. Just to hear the sound of a knife going in somebody and hear them scream and getting the blood on you. You have to when you stab somebody, you have to get close to them. It's not like a gun too.
Right. Yeah. So then these friends would take their friend out. And so the friend is, their defense is down because they know these people. It's not like they're afraid. So, of course, they were able to get close to her. But then having the ability, it's like, to do something like that. Because then that's the real world. That's when it's like, they might have a difficulty discerning,
reality.
Reality. But then even when you're faced with it like that, then it seems like at some point it would kick in. At some point you'd go, oh wow, I'm actually seeing this happen in front of me. It's like we always talk about Louis C.K. when he brought up, and we talk about it a lot because it's really profound, how he talked about how he didn't want to give his kids a cell phone because he felt that these things separate you from your ability to develop empathy. And it's very true. We've seen this time and time again. So clearly these kids are lacking in an understanding of empathy. But then part of what sort of separates you from your ability to discern empathy is the fact that you don't have to see what the person looks like. You don't have to hear their reaction.
Yeah.
You don't have to see them being upset. But this is them seeing it happen and then continuing to do it.
Yeah.
So how did they do that? You know what I mean? Like, there's got to be something missing in the story, because we just didn't kill people because we saw Jason do it. We didn't just kill people.
Yeah, and it's their friend. That's what baffled me. It's not like it was a girl that was bullying them or a girl that they hated. It was somebody that trusted them. So how do you do that? I don't get it.
It's really, really strange, and it's and when I heard the story, I found it very disturbing, and then when I read about it, it was even more disturbing because it was clear that they didn't just, you know, scratch her. They actually stabbed her 19 times. They really were trying to kill her, and she survived. She actually managed to just like poor thing. I mean, I don't know how she's ever gonna get over this, if she'll go on to live a normal life after this, because that's just such a horrible, horrible, awful thing to have happen to you.
Yeah, and as a child, too, yeah.
I mean, at that kind of age, and you're so impressionable, and, you know, can you imagine this feeling of these people that you trusted, your friends, and then how could you trust people after that? How could you have close relationships after that? It would just be, you'd be so afraid of everybody in the world around you. And, you know, it's really, because like you say, it wasn't an enemy, it was a friend. So how could you even allow yourself to become close to someone after such a thing? But we've seen this with these school shootings. It's almost always there's some sort of pharmacological drug or something going on. And we're going to do a show about this in the next week or two, where we're going to talk about someone who's done a lot of research on these enzyme deficiencies that people have, that a large percent of the population has, where they cannot metabolize or, you know, put through their bodies normally medications or any kind of synthetics for that matter. So it could translate to pesticides or vaccines or whatever. And we'll have to, you know, investigate it further, but there may have been a cover-up, which you can understand, you know, why the pharmaceutical company wouldn't want people to know about that, because how many customers would they lose if they actually just took the time to test people before they gave them drugs to see if they could actually metabolize them and process them through their bodies without getting sick. And so, you know, it's quite indicative in these things when, if the kids are on drugs, if then they do have some propensity to not be able to tolerate them. But these things are dangerous. I mean, I don't know how many people have this enzyme deficiency. I'd imagine it's a lot, because you always hear stories just from friends and people and family throughout the years of, oh, I took this and it made me sick, or oh, I took this and you know, and I felt worse. You know, it's like, I don't know anybody who's ever been on medications that doesn't have a story like that. You know, so I would say that a lot of people have it, or most people have it, or all people have it. And so therefore, you know, we're all getting stuck and stabbed and, you know, sprayed and, you know, injected with all these things that we can't tolerate. And so what happens when you're giving kids these pharmacological drugs that you know they can't process, and they're going through their body, they're getting into their brain, and, you know, and they're causing inflammation in the brain. They're going literally insane, and they become monsters, because it doesn't make sense. People just aren't like that. You know, people just don't stab 19 times for no reason. And then blame it on flippin' Slenderman. You know, it's like, my son is 11. He was telling us about. Remember, he was Slenderman for Halloween like a year ago.
Yeah, I remember. He's the one. That's what the first person I found out was from your son. So. Right,
and to me, I didn't trip out on that because I had characters like that when I was a kid too. You know, there were people like there were. It was a myth, and you weren't sure if they were real or not. You know, when you're a kid, you don't really know.
Yeah, and people like dress up as, like, you know, vampires and zombies and witches and ghosts and demons and devils and all this stuff for Halloween.
Right, and they don't kill their friends to pledge allegiance to Dracula.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't put on fake fangs and then sit there and, like, try to suck my friend's blood because I am such a lover of Dracula.
Yeah.
Or, you know, or now it's the hunky dude in the, what are those shows called, the movies? You know what I'm talking about? The new vampire movies that everybody's watching.
The Twilight?
Yeah. So now you got a hunky vampire, okay? So he's real cute and everything. And you know, you don't see girls, like, loving him, swooning so much. I mean, we have
trying to care for him, yeah.
I don't want to give anybody an idea, so please don't take this out there.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, like, these have been around for so long. It's so ingrained in our history. There's something different in our society today. And we talk about it time and time again about you know, what's in our food is not right, what's in our water is not right, these vaccines are not right, kids are being sprayed with chemtrails, they're being drugged to the hilt.
Yeah.
You know, I met this lady one time, her son was 5, and he was having some behavioral problems at school. He got sent to the principal's office and knocked over the principal's desk. And
yeah.
He's only 5, right?
Yeah.
But their solution, she took him to the doctor, and the solution was to put him on Ritalin. But this wasn't even a psychiatrist, this wasn't a psychologist or anybody who could have diagnosed him with ADHD, but yet they went ahead and put him on Ritalin at 5.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa. And we all kind of were. This was a lecture, a group we went to learn about the legal system.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of shocking. I was like, wow, that's a really young kid to be put on speed, you know?
Yeah.
And,
well, you know, I've heard of cases, too, where people have severe allergies that can mess with their head like that, too. You know, they're allergic. So maybe the kid, they didn't bother to see if he had allergies, if there was any kind of sexual or physical abuse going on at home before they put him on Ritalin. They just put him on Ritalin, huh?
They just put him on Ritalin, and I don't think that there was necessary. I mean, I don't know. I just met this woman one time, but I didn't get the impression that there was an abuse situation in the home. I got the impression that, you know, he had loving parents, but they just didn't know what to do with his behavior. It was kind of they were just sort of lost, and the doctor told them to do that, so they did. And you know, so that was where we get into that whole idea of you just blindly follow someone who you think is an authority figure, credentialism, where you just sort of, you know, we were talking about it before, they replaced the priests, and now they're the new deities, is, you know, doctors and scientists and whatnot. And so they just trusted them, and they said, okay, and we'll do that. But but that's a really, really young child, and that's a very dangerous drug.
Yeah.
So I don't know what these kids were on, if anything. I mean, if they weren't on anything, I'd be really surprised. But I just...
Yeah, I think they have to have been on something.
Right. And if this story even, you know, and some people are already in the truth movement are already even claiming false flag. I mean, I don't even know. I can't say because we don't know enough about it right now to really try and make that assertion, because it's obviously so much is being left out of the story. It's just creepy as all could be. But I just don't know. And then the other factor that has come into my mind is that it seems that there's something different that goes on today with the internet and these computer systems. I don't know if it's the EMFs or if it's some sort of level of detachment. You know, like when we had Jason Burmis on our show, and I was talking about that guy, the doctor who has studied addiction to pornography. And he was saying, you know, it's so different now. The internet has brought this addiction to a new level, but it's to the point where, as before, you know, guys could be addicted to pornography, you know, to magazines and to videos, and they, you know,
you have
really
to like go out and like buy the magazine and buy the video, and you know, right?
Well, the thing is, go ahead.
You have to go out and buy it as opposed to just being able to order it, and you get that instant gratification. So,
well, the thing is that they didn't become addicted to the point where they had erectile dysfunction in the presence of a real person. They could still have sex with a real woman. And now they're having cases where it's actually affecting them physically, and they're not able to have an erection in the presence of a woman. they can only get the erection in the presence of their porn. So he's saying, so this is why it's brought this to a whole new level, because he says he's never seen this sort of, for one, there's more addiction now, because it's so, like you're saying, it's so accessible. And then two, it's actually having a physical outcome, whereas before it didn't. And so that's where I wonder if these machines are not, messing with us in this way, that we don't even understand the depths of, because like we've said, there's so few people that are experts on
this makes sure, and, talk about, going back to Chris's film and talking about mind control, we already know that TV can do that to a certain degree with the flicker rate of the alpha waves, so maybe this technology is more advanced, but why would these two kids just be affected? Because there are lots of kids that read the website that they went to and, that know all this stuff. So maybe it's a combination of that and psychotropic drugs. I mean, something's missing. I just don't buy that. They just woke up one day, and they plot it together, too.
Right, yeah.
It's kind of like, have you...
Columbine.
Huh?
Go ahead. I said it's like with Columbine, too. I mean, it was, there were two guys plotted together, but go ahead. No,
but I just, something's not, it's rubbing me the wrong way. Something's not, something is being left out. And, you said some people are already claiming false flag. Is it now they're going to try and use this to crack down on the internet rights and all this stuff?
I would imagine, yeah. I would imagine, I mean, even if it wasn't a false flag, if we know that the elites like to hone in on a opportunity, like if you take we had the Santa Barbara shootings not that long ago, which I can't remember how many people were killed. Several people were stabbed, some people were run over by a car, and some people were shot. And so, of course, they're going to isolate it and try and use it for gun control. But even more disturbing than that was there was, how much money was it? I think it was close to $100 million now is being funded by us, the taxpayer, through our administration, to fund research into how to microchip people with mental illness. Microchip their brain.
Oh, okay? Jesus.
This is no joke. This has been in several mainstream articles right now that this is what they're working on. So, I mean, we're talking a lot.
And they're basically going to use these, experiment on these people, again, like they usually do already. Like they have done throughout history. They get mentally handicapped people and orphans and, to experiment on. So basically they're going to be experimenting on these people, but now it's going to be more out in the open. It's terrible.
Well, that, and then, who, so then, as we've talked about before, and we should probably do an entire show on this as well, is the world of psychiatry and the world of psychology. So who's going to determine mental illness? Who gets to make this assertion that this person deserves the microchip? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So they're using this guy in Santa Barbara saying, well, he was mentally ill. He would have been a candidate for this microchip. And so people go, oh, yeah, of course, we wouldn't want that because then he was mentally ill and then he killed these people. But who gets to choose? Yeah. These scientists that we're talking about, these credentialists who act like they're
these religious zealots, that are playing
right.
God, they are. They're going to be the ones because, I mean, not that I agree with it, but yeah,
Right. And right, exactly. So these guys are going to determine who is in need of a microchip and who's going to be the one to go out and kill them. Would they have microchipped these two little girls? I mean, would they have been able to pick that up right away? I doubt it. It's just, but this is what they're using. So whether Santa Barbara was a false flag or not, a lot of people are claiming it was. I haven't researched it really at all, so I can't really say. But I can say that our administration is certainly pouncing on it as an opportunity to fund into this new science that they say is going to help prevent such crimes by microchipping the mentally ill. So, it's really creepy because as we've seen throughout history, people with disabilities and mental illness are usually the first to be attacked. Like the Nazis, they came for the disabled, and they're the first to go. Yeah. they're going to be like you're saying, they're going to experiment on them first. They're going to be chipped first, and people are going to accept it because they don't want another Santa Barbara to happen. So That's the shim sham on the whim wham. So that's where that probably deserves more attention. I mean, if anyone's researched that and they want to come forward and talk to us about it, it probably does deserve more attention, because if it was a false flag, I mean, they're certainly burying this story. It's not very well known mainstream, and they're focusing on the gun thing. You know, but what about the microchipping of people's brains? That's pretty disturbing. You know, I wouldn't want someone to, you know, I have a son with autism. I wouldn't want someone to do that to my kid and be like, oh yeah, he needs a microchip.
Yeah.
I'd be like, to hell he does, you know.
Yeah, I know. Oh, that's so. God damn, people wake up. Just wake up.
Right.
We're so in 1984. We're so here.
It's
not
so
even.
here,
yeah, it's not even. I would joke about it. It's like, oh, we're almost there. No, we're here.
Right, and you can look at other, you know, examples of. I mean, what was the one that came to mind? Minority Report, the one with Tom Cruise.
Yeah, the thought crime.
You know, and exactly, thought crime, and you're guilty before you even commit the crime.
Yeah.
You know, so that's what this microchipping is. They're going to, you know, get people that haven't even committed a crime, they haven't done anything yet, but they want to microchip them just in case they do, in case the thought comes into their mind. What are they going to do? Control it? We're just about out of time here, but so we're going to have to wrap up the show, but we want to thank Chris Emery for being on our show. We hope that you guys check